how in this whole process, by dollar washing and theory coloring the Indian mind, they used our bright young people. They took them to states, bright young people. They became the title of my talk today is Transfer of Civilizational Guilt. The Hindu Dvesh of Harvard, American Academia, and the instrumentality of mother-hating hired Indian Girvitias. Post-war USA, World War II, USA became the representative West. Europe was finished, war mein. Britain was finished. America became the capitalist and the West, as against Soviet Union, the socialist, the communist and the socialist, the communist state. So there was this, the whole world. Now America, post-war America became the West. 1945 onwards, it became the West. And since 47, when India became free, India has had a very uneven relationship with the USA. Because our government, the government, the people who took over power, who were gifted the power by the British. I'm saying gifted, nobody fought for it. They got it. So they were gifted the power. They were Nehru, particularly Jawaharlal Nehru, who became the Prime Minister. Not a democratically elected Prime Minister, but a nominated Prime Minister, nominated by Gandhi. He, in the capitalist and the socialist USA and Russia, the interesting thing is this leadership or the intelligentsia Indian, which was at the top, that is the educated, English educated intelligentsia, they represented that. They had a very interesting split. Ideally, they were socialists. I mean, they liked the socialist ideology, and if they could use it to harm some of the Indian people, they will use it. But they preferred, as a way of life, they had a preference for USA, the capitalist. So they lived like a capitalist. The rose and beautiful dresses and, taking citizenship of London and all those things. Kutte palne, badhiya, huge dogs. Lifestyle is capitalist, right? But for the people, they are socialists. So so they caught with this split. And this is even today. In JNU, most of the teachers, leftists, were all the time, talking about, this anti-capitalism, anti-imperialism and, the poverty and injustice and inequity and all that. But they all, every year used to visit America and American universities, every year. In fact, it was said in USA, in JNU, that if you want to become a professor, you must have 3 qualifications. Leftist ideology, American degree, and a foreign wife. If you have these 3 qualifications, you are bound to become professor before your time. You will be promoted. So they were leftists here, but they were visiting America every year. And they liked good things like them, good things, they understand good things. They looked for food and technology, we looked to America. And for verbiage and jargon, we were with the Soviet Union, Russia. We were famous non-alignment, and the cutting statement that when the issue is right and wrong, you cannot be non-aligned. When it is right and wrong, you can't be non-aligned. So this uneven relationship, food in Tegla America. Then one watershed is 1950s में India signed from 50 onwards up to 60 5 agreements with USA for food import, because we were not self-sufficient in food. And that program, there is Public Law 480, PL 480. Public Law 480, PL 480. This was, in fact, drafted in USA earlier. USA had, this was a US plan, PL 480. India signed an agreement to have PL 480, India also. You get the point. PL 480 was not only for India. Its motivation was that it's California, vast, agricultural lands of America. They were producing a lot of food, wheat. Remember those days world population इतना नहीं था. बहुत इतना overproduction of wheat. Overproduction. So there is a good Samaritans, that we will give food to the suffering humanity. Our noble intentions have to be covered by ignoble. It is the other way here, but in fact it means this. The ignoble intention, what you are doing is you are getting rid of your surplus wheat. And you are giving it in the name of doing good to the hungry. Africa mein, India mein, about 3 billion people benefited, and about 150 countries. But it meant that, and it was all with, it was all either cash or credit, nothing, no free lunches. Cash or credit. So they got rid of their surplus food. They made a little money out of it also. And more important, this was food and foreign policy. It was not just food, foreign policy. You see, they acquired some control also over the countries. In fact, India also started having problems. You see, because from 1950 to 1960, we had 5 agreements. In till 55, 56, over 453 crore. The terms were that they will give you food, wheat, rice, corn, mainly wheat, 90% wheat. Some rice, let's say about 10 million metric tons of wheat and 2 million metric tons or 1 million metric ton of rice, 1 million metric ton of corn, like this, 453 crore. But in 1960, we signed another agreement, and this is what I call the PL 480. Nice. Where we imported food worth 1700 crore. And the terms were that the rupee equivalent of the cost of that food decided by USA, the donor itself, कि हमारी कणक बहुत बढ़िया है, इसकी कीमत तो इतने डॉलर है, इतने इसमें, है ना, and you have to, you didn't have a negotiating. You were hungry, you were hungry people. So they were the dollar equivalent of the dollars, rupees, they were deposited in India-US technical cooperation, US technical cooperation mission यहाँ खोला गया. उनके अकाउंट में रूपी इक्विवेलेंट टू द कॉस्ट 1700 करोड़ डाल दिए गए. उसमें Part of it was, of course, taken as cost of transport and all that, but most of it was there and to be used in consultation with the government of India, right? So there are two things, mostly technology, very elementary. As you remember that when a supercomputer America invented and India wanted supercomputer, they refused. Even today, they refuse certain technologies. So very elementary technologies है ना, वो चाकू शाकू दे दिए थोड़े से हैं, कोई बड़ी बंदूक शंदूक नहीं देनी है, that kind of thing. So and generally it is the surplus material which is given as a grant or as something very great contribution. That is the whole thing about a capitalist society. Now the point is that this money was used mainly to develop a buffer stock. Buffer stock बहुत ज़्यादा नहीं बन पाया, but it had a negative effect on economy. What was that? The negative effect was, you see, that it slowed down India's own effort to become self-reliant in food. Self-reliant food. India became self-reliant in food only under Lal Bahadur Shastri in 1962, when a green revolution was, initiated by M.S. Swaminathan. And it's another matter that the green revolution later on became greed revolution. 5 crops every year from land. So the land is destroyed virtually, poisoned. But then we became self-reliant later. But this free food, the food which is coming free or in like this, it slackened the economic growth, slackened. But it was still, there were some advantages, nobody went hungry, and but although America at one time threatened to stop, and there was a specter of famine in India, and the Indian government had to, they tried to use it as a lever for India to change its foreign policy. India did not do it in substance, but India did not even go the whole hog, the direction in which it should have gone. You see those countries like, for example, Taiwan, Formosa, Singapore, Korea, they were as poorer than India in 1947. But they chose the path by which they became tigers. Tigers. They are called 4 tigers. But India did not go the whole hog. So ये नुकसान हुआ. But the second, what was the more debilitating effect, and in long term very harmful, was that while the Indian government did try to create, its agricultural base, to improve its own, production, we did not do it sufficiently, but we did try, at least economically, not to remain dependent. But the other area in which this money was used was education. And as you know, we have always had either people as education ministers who had no real sympathy for the India's own knowledge systems or traditions. You see, they were with them. But in this case now, what happened? That they did 2 things in education. They gave fellowships to teachers and students to go to America, to American universities. And secondly, they gave massive book grants to all the universities in India, book gift, American books, gift. अब Indian libraries, आप university में जाइए, they are full of American books. This started in 60s. And the by 65, I mean 66, 67, I mean by 62, 63, most of the people, most of the teachers in different disciplines, you know, they will select the who were at that time either in power or the best, or had a reputation for being the best. It's not always, not that always they took somebody who was who had reputation as a scholar, but if he had power in a university, he was such. So they picked up. In 1958, there was a conference, kind of a workshop sponsored by USEFI. And USEFI is the arm, USEFI, United States Education Foundation of India. It was founded in 1950, just along the first PL 480 agreement, 1950. USEFI, 1950. And this education foundation, they in 1958, they sponsored a workshop in Pune, Deccan College, Pune, in which very many, not completely young, but not even middle age, you know, उस एज में अबाउट 40 में जो थे, 35 45 तक, जो कि इधर दे वर इधर सीनियर लेक्चरर्स और दे हैड बिकम रीडर्स, ऐसे लोगों को उनको वहाँ बुलाया गया. एंड वो होल सेल, उनमें से एक माता प्रसाद था, नाम ही उसका माता प्रसाद था, वो नहीं गया, नेगी कोई था हिमाचल का, बाकी सब चले गए. दे वर पिक्ड अप, टेकन एंड टेकन. Then they opened fellowships, you know, Fulbright, and they offered fellowships for doctoral work, visits to American universities, 2-month, 3-month visits, to which all the people, you know, I mean, it became a craze in Indian universities to visit America, to go there. And when they went there, they came back with two things: American theory and American bourbon whiskey bottles. दो चीज़ें लाते थे. वहाँ तो पीते ही थे, पर साथ में लाते थे. बourbon इसलिए कि ड्राई बourbon whiskey अमेरिका की, केंटकी बड़ी मशहूर है, तो वो लेके आते थे. साथ में वहाँ थियरी, जो भी उनके सब्जेक्ट में जो अमेरिकन थिंकिंग है, जो उनको बुक्स दी जाती थी गिफ्ट, वो लाते थे और यहाँ आके वो चालू हो जाते थे स्टूडेंट्स पर. यू सी, सो व्हेन दे सेड, फॉर एग्जांपल इन लिंग्विस्टिक्स, दे सेड फोनीम, अमेरिकन्स, वी सेड फोनीम. दे सेड मॉर्फीम, वी सेड मॉर्फीम. दे सेड ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन, वी सेड ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन. दे सेड जनरेटिव, वी सेड जनरेटिव. टिल दे स्टॉप्ड. व्हेन दे स्टॉप्ड, वी आल्सो स्टॉप्ड. But in the meantime, they had successfully taken us out of the habit of thinking. They had trained us in adapting and translating. And as I said in one of my lectures, that the Indian mind became a translated mind and a translator's mind. Translated mind and translator's mind. तो ये कर रहे हैं. So these people were taken, they went. And I remember in 66, they started coming back. And even when they were readers, such was the awe of the American degree. You know, they were taken, they went, spent there 2 years, 3 years. They did PhD, they must be already working, and they took that work there and they got a degree. एंड आईवी लीग यूनिवर्सिटी, वहाँ तो कम ही जाते, पर कॉर्नेल बहुत जाते थे. कॉर्नेल है, येल है, येल में कम से कम था, पेंसिल्वेनिया में बहुत जाते थे, है ना. सो दे केम बैक विद डिग्रीज. सच वॉज द ऑ दैट इवन एज रीडर्स दे वर मेड हेड्स ऑफ डिपार्टमेंट्स. एंड व्हेन देयर वाज नो डिपार्टमेंट वेयर दे ओपनड ए, अमेरिकन्स हेल्प टू, यूसीफाई हेल्प देम टू ओपन द डिपार्टमेंट. किताबें आ गई, टीचर लग गए, वहाँ अमेरिकन ट्रेंड आ गया. So this is how gradually in the 60s, you see, through students and teachers and book grants, though if you examine the reading lists of all subjects in around 70 यूनिवर्सिटीज़ का, उनका रीडिंग लिस्ट देखिए, आपको यू विल टू थिंग्स, वन, यू विल नॉट फाइंड एनी इंडियन टेक्स्ट, मतलब इंडियन टेक्स्ट, इंडियन नॉलेज का, इवन इन सब्जेक्ट्स वेयर इंडिया हैज़ एन एक्नॉलेज्ड ट्रेडिशन लाइक फिलोसफी, linguistics, mathematics, astronomy, and acknowledged traditions हैं, which they acknowledge themselves, they acknowledge. But even in those, you will not find any reading Indian. It will be mostly, you will not find any European also. It is Anglo-American. Anglo-American. So when we say Indian education suffered from Eurocentrism, we are wrong. I wish it was Eurocentric. Then we would have read, European scholars, European philosophers. Germany had a long tradition of philosophy, and we would have read them, but we didn't. We read only Anglo-Americans. So this in the sphere of education, the syllabi were changed, the disciplines were introduced, like linguistics, it was introduced. Syllabi were changed, syllabi were made totally Anglo-American, the readings all American, and there was, as a result of this, the Indian Academy, you see two things, not only books, the theory, they gave us the theory. So these people, teachers who went there, they brought theory, and they asked the students to, analyze your mother tongue, or you analyze your this trade in the perspective of this theory. But the job of the Indian professor was to provide data, Indian data, to show that the theory propounded in America is so good, it has such explanatory power that it explains the Indian reality completely. It was very much ethnocentric, it was divisive, the whole approach was ethnicity oriented. I used to call it Tani Tirdam research. Tani Tirdam, matlab the Brahmins call water Tirth and the non-Brahmins call it Tani. So, Tani Tirdam research was divisive research. It was used to divide the people, ethnicity, ethnocentric. And anyways, by this what happened? America became theory, we became data. So Indian Academy became an appendage of American Academy. Believe me, any theme which became prominent in American universities, theme on which the Americans, held seminars or conferences, and they will take care to invite amenable Indian scholars there, professors. So they will go, they'll metaphor. तो metaphor पे हो गया. They'll come back, and for 3 years all Indian universities will do only metaphor. Then the feminist theory came, for example, and all Indian universities were doing, women's studies and feminist. UGC also set up women's study centers. While in Indian thought, in the core Indian thought, where you have the Purusharthas, for example, 4 ends of life, ashram है, 3 मार्ग हैं, मोक्ष है. मोक्ष में तो कोई आदमी या नारी का भेद नहीं है, उनका तरीका अलग है. A woman may get moksha by bringing up wonderful human beings, and the man by earning money or by after earning money becoming a yogi or a sannyasi like you, or shift back, whatever. Every individual has his or her own way, but there is no distinction that so and so is barred from it. But then we got this because the theory they brought, I said America then means the West. That is, America inherited the legacy of Western thought. And Western thought, beginning with Old Testament, is anthropocentric, man-centered, and conflict-oriented, because the goal of human being is to enjoy and to believe that everything in the creation is for him, because he is the supreme creature. जैसे डिटरनमी में I mean, God tells Adam, I have made you in my image. The fish of water and fowl of the air are for you to enjoy. Exercise dominion over them. उनके ऊपर dominion. So you see, they got into the dominion mindset and comfortable mindset. So we are not surprised that in 16th century, Descartes, writing on method, says, the goal of knowledge is to bend nature to man's purpose. So everything is to promote man's comfort and promote his good life. And for that he is free to dominate, to exercise dominion. So you should not be surprised that the West, the powerful, whether it is Libya or it is Iraq or it is Vietnam or Afghanistan, they go, because it is ordained that they are the superior race and they have to dominate. Racism is built into them. Evolutionary theory which codified by Darwin, but the idea that as time passes, things move to perfection and what comes later is the best. It is there, right, even in the Greek thought. You see, when Aristotle, for example, says that tragedy is the best form, highest form of literature, because you begin with comedy, then you have poetry, then epic, and then tragedy. So it comes on top. So the evolutionary thinking that so things will improve. So there are, for example, reality, or what is represented as reality. It is of three kinds: what it is, what it appears, what it ought to be. So this ought to be is evolutionary. So it is inbuilt. So this evolutionary notion taught, and you exercise, dominate and all that. This theory naturally is a conflict oriented theory, because man is in conflict with everything else. And therefore in 1854 our good friend Karl Marx codifies this very clearly, that it is through conflict that development takes place. That is what they believe. It is through conflict, संघर्ष से विकास होता है ना? संघर्ष से तू आगे बढ़, हम तेरे साथ हैं, है ना? जिंदाबाद जिंदाबाद। क्यों? संघर्ष से विकास होता है ना। अगर आप लड़ोगे नहीं तो आप डेवलप कैसे करोगे? So conflict oriented. Renaissance, the very interesting thing is that, I will come to that a little later. Renaissance, there were in Europe, and Renaissance was in a way, Renaissance was also brought about by the Islamic conquest of Spain. Just as, Islamic conquest of Spain put an end to the classical age in Europe, classical studies. You see, in fact, the Greek and Rome scholars of Greek and Latin scholars, when Constantinople fell to the Turks, they fled with their books to European cities, and that is how the Renaissance began. They fled with Greek and Latin books, Roman and this, and end of the classical age and beginning of the vernacular local languages. Same thing happened in India around the 11th century. You see, end of the classical age and beginning of the vernacular translations and so on and so on. Anyways, so you see, this Renaissance two things happened. What is Renaissance in Europe? Renaissance is the ontological shift from God to man. This is important. The Abrahamic belief systems, religions or faith, three, Judaism, Christianity, Islam. The Abrahamic systems are theocentric, God-centered. And the God is one, एक ईश्वरवाद, and is formless, निराकार, एक और निराकार है. However, when we think deeply, निराकार तो है पर निर्गुण नहीं है, सगुण है. इसीलिए that is why the three systems which are Abrahamic, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, they fight each other. One God, but my one God, not your one God. And Spinoza, in interpreting the scripture, says the Hebraic God is an angry God. You see, an angry God. So this, but it is theocentric. And throughout the Middle Ages, the scholarship, the Christian scholarship, was all about God. Nature of God, nature of man, man's relationship to God, man's actions, his sins, his confession, his redemption, relationship of God and man. This was the scholarship. When this disturbance came, Spain was, captured and they were coming in, and then the whole focus of the European people shifted from indulging in the luxury of thinking about God to thinking about their own survival. And that means the ontological shift took place from God to man. And this is Renaissance. So when in Renaissance, instead of thinking, God को उन्होंने फिर आले में बैठा दिया, अपना उधर दिया, and they started, fighting and raising armies and improving the living conditions, because they were cold countries, very cold countries. Life was not very easy. So instead of seeking solace from God, they started working on the living conditions, God to man. So ontological shift from God to man. And that itself, when they shifted to man, then because the basic drive in the Abrahamic mind is the drive of difference, bhed. See, why? Because when you are one God people, if you have the constraint of one God, one book, one truth भी एक है, then your mind is, has a straight jacket. So your human mind seeks to break through it. And how do you break through it? Through the notion of difference, bhed. Contrast it with the Indian mind. Indian mind developed in immense variety. You read Vishnu Puran and there are rivers and mountains and people, colors, their faith, their ideas. India has been a land of diversity, variety from the beginning. But when there is so much variety, you see so much difference. The Indian thought has moved from difference to non-difference. भेद से अभेद. You see, but then this is the difference. There, the Abrahamic mind is alerted towards difference. And difference, ethnic difference, religious difference, social difference, economic difference, class difference. So Karl Marx, the first conflict in the Renaissance is between God and man. God became an adversary. God is very harsh, very hard. And then you have to, if you do something, and then you have to confess and you have to seek grace and all that. So first conflict is God and man. Then slowly, when the before the onset of the industrial revolution, when they start they start making life comfortable, प्रोडक्शन है, फैक्ट्रीज लगानी है, वो पुलिस बनानी है, पानी नदी बह रही है तो वहाँ एक चक्की चलानी है ताकि वो चक्की अपने आप चलती रहे और उसमें आटा पिसता रहे, ऑल दिस. देन दिस बिगिनिंग ऑफ इंडस्ट्री, बिगिनिंग ऑफ मशीन टू मेक लाइफ कंफर्टेबल हुआ है. देन द नोशन ऑफ क्लासेस, those who produce and those who enjoy the produce, or those who fund the production and those who actually produce, classes, workers, proletariat, owners, capitalists and the proletariat. So the second conflict is between man and man, because shifted to God, shifted to man, from God to man, then the conflict between man and man. But before that, sorry, I missed a stage. When they shifted to man as the object of knowledge, they studied, they found that nature is very harsh, very cold hai. So nature became an enemy. First God is the enemy, then nature became the enemy. That's why I just mentioned Descartes. Goal of knowledge is to bend nature to man's purpose. So nature is bent so much that they have to set up departments of environmental sciences. This is a characteristic habit that the Western mind has developed. They first destroy and then they try to preserve, because there is an assumption that with the increase of knowledge, whatever is destroyed can be recovered, but this is an illusion. Whatever is destroyed, most often it cannot be recovered. You can mentally contrast it with our Indian. We don't have one God. We are not one God people. We are not one formless people. We are Nirgun, Sagun, Nirakar, Nirgun, Sakar, Sagun, but there is logic. There is a logical fault line in the Abrahamic system, that God is formless but not attributeless. Here you have Sakar, Sagun, Nirakar, Nirgun. In the same way, their nature is the enemy. Here nature is the mother. Nature is the mother.
Descartes' famous line is, no, I think, therefore I am.
हाँ, वो that.
Thinking.
हाँ, वो उसकी implications बहुत हैं. That statement, their very existence, you see, my existence. In fact, that was an attempt to liberate from God again. You see, I exist by virtue of my thinking, my thought. But remember, Descartes believed firmly in the existence of God. Firmly, you see, existed in the existence of God. Although Heidegger, when he talks about being and time, Descartes is one of the persons, you see, he cites for this idea. But that's it. Cartesian philosophy is the philosophy of difference. Cartesian, the separateness of reality. Everything is separate, one from the other. Separateness, separate, and that added to the Old Testament, that you are better than the others, best, so you dominate. Then separate, so naturally conflict, and the conflict between God and man, then nature and man, and then our good friend Karl Marx, Industrial Revolution, conflict between man and man, class war, and then between man and woman, feminist theory, man and women. So they always have the other. There is the other. तो ये सारी थेरी कॉन्फ्लिक्ट ओरिएंटेड थेरी आई यहाँ, हमारे यहाँ लाई गई सारी रिसर्च यूनिवर्सिटीज़ में, और उसको पढ़ाने वाले वहाँ से होके आते थे, और हर साल उनका रिफ्रेशर कोर्स होता था अमेरिका में. नई किताब आती थी, थोड़ा सा मॉडिफिकेशन होता था, और पूरा आई मीन जनरेशन, whole generations, 30 years, from 60 to 90s, you see, this happened. And ultimately, there is a disillusionment because the American Academy itself shifted from scholarship to politics. Great example is Chomsky, Noam Chomsky, who led a virtual linguistic revolution, for them, from syntactic structures 1957 to minimalist in 1995-96, in between aspects and government and binding and reality and philosophy and so on. Finally, he gave up. He gave up for reasons which are subject matter of another subject. But then he gave up because at the end he reached where Indian grammarian Panini had begun, in fact. He reached there, that there are only two units, basic units of language, N and V. And Paninian grammar begins with sup, ting, antim padam. The padas are of two kinds, those which have nominal inflection, those which have verbal inflection. So when he reached that point, he must have discovered कि यार ये तो इतने 30 साल लगा दिए और वहाँ पहुँचे. So he gave it up and he joined politics. He became a great spokesman of Palestinian cause. Being a Jew, because you see, I will take up this point later. The Sarkari intellectuals, the American Academy became, has always been, most academies have been the arms, the implementing instruments of government policies and thought. So that kind of thinking they brought here for us, and we followed them very sincerely. अभी बताइए चेंज कब आया पक्का? ये 1891 से 1930 तक तो ये इंडियन बुक्स ट्रांसलेट करते रहे, पढ़ाते रहे. संस्कृत स्टडीज इन यूरोप 19th century, they were the major and their best thinkers. In fact, contemporary European thought is generated by thinkers. I will name three who were great Sanskritists. Ferdinand de Saussure, structuralism, father of structuralism, whose PhD was on genitive case in Sanskrit. Sambandhakarak, his PhD was on. He was a professor of Sanskrit in Geneva. Trubetskoy of Praha University. He was the father of structural phonology. His PhD was on Rigved. And Roman Jakobson, whose great work, great essay, which is on the loss of language. What happens when you lose language? Mind जब problems होती हैं. So if we visit the AIIMS का जो psychiatric ward है, you will have people who don't use nouns, I said it earlier, or either you would use verbs, or like that, the loss of language. In how do you lose language, what order? And one very interesting thing is, the two Jews, one talked of loss of language and the other talked of acquisition of language, Chomsky. How language is gained, and Roman Jakobson talked about how language is lost. So this third person, Roman Jakobson, second Trubetskoy, first Saussure, they were fathers of structuralism. Structuralism to post-structuralism to postmodernism, postmodernism, and now even postmodernism. All this is from these three great Sanskrit scholars. 19th century Europe was doing Sanskrit as Indians have been doing commerce and computer for several years now. We've been doing that. तो ये जो उनका जो ये revolution है, you see the European mind का, उनकी जो theory conflict oriented, वो हमारे यहाँ भी imbibe हुई. They took people as scholars. I often said that all half bright people went on Fulbright scholarships or whatever. Some Fulbright also. Professors were taken there regularly for their refresher courses, and they gave book grants and book gifts and all that. So the Indian university intellectual became dollar washed and theory colored, है ना, dollar washed. क्योंकि dollar seeking El Dorado, America was El Dorado. And in the 70s and 80s, I used to say the greatest tragedy that can strike an Indian young man or a woman is refusal of the American visa. That's the greatest tragedy at that time. Dollar, world of dollars. But I think you appreciate the phrase. We had then people in the universities who were dollar washed and theory colored. Conflict. So India, how can India be harmonious? You see, you have to show conflict. Conflict between people, Dravidian and Aryan, rich and poor, Dalit and non-Dalit, Swarn and Dalit. अच्छा, दलित में भी मतलब कि ओबीसी और उसमें भी फिर देयर इज ए क्रीमी लेयर एंड देयर इज ए नॉन क्रीमी लेयर. मतलब यू गो ऑन डिवाइडिंग दिस सोसाइटी and conflict and dividing. So this is the background, and this background now when we look at what my drive is today, maybe we will continue later, but my drive is that I want to show how in this whole process, by dollar washing and theory coloring the Indian mind, they used our bright young people. They took them to states, bright young people, transfer of civilizational guilt, the Hindu dvesh of Harvard, American academia, and the instrumentality of mother-hating hired इंडियन गिरमिटियाज. गिरमिटियाज कौन थे? जब फिजी में पहले ये लोग गए, अंग्रेज लोग, तो वहाँ ये शुगर केन की बड़ी प्लांटेशन थी, तो इनको लेबर चाहिए थी. तो बिहार यूपी से जहाज भर के उनको कहते हैं गिरमिटिया. तो गिरमिटिया तो लेबर थी. इन बिटवीन व्हेन द कंप्यूटर रेवोल्यूशन स्टार्टेड एंड इंडियंस डिड वेरी वेल इन कंप्यूटर, you remember thousands of Indians were employed. Silicon Valley सारी भर गई उनसे. I call that phase cyber labor. First they had the sugar plant labor, agricultural labor, then Indians were the cyber labor. And third phase में now you have the imperial labor to speak for the Americans, to speak for the West, and to impose their theoretical framework on Indian society. You remember in 1835, in the English Education Act, they said we want to produce people who are Indian in appearance, but in opinion, values, morals and intellect, they are British. They will be our interpreters. Now in this phase, you have a new kind of interpreters. Now you don't have really interpreters, they are the salesmen of American thought, American academy. सेल्समैन नहीं है, उन्हीं को उसको बेचना. उसी को आप अगर पीएचडी करोगे तो आपको अच्छी नौकरी मिलेगी, आपको फेलोशिप मिलेगी. अमेरिकन फूक पे क्या काम करो, वेस्टर्न ट्रेडिशन पे बहुत होता रहा इंडिया में ऐसी. सो दिस बैच ऑफ पीपल दे टुक दिस थियरी, they used it to prove that the Hindu society is guilty of racism, it is guilty of genocide. I remember the Gujarat riots in which 1000 people died, 870 were Muslims and 230 were Hindus. And then before that, 60 pilgrims were burnt in a carriage. Nobody talks of them. But those 870 is genocide. Now, a civilization, because America is now the West, it has inherited its heritage. It is now the spokesman of America. Now, a civilization which annihilated 17 million Red Indians, 37 million Mexicans, 5 million Jews, 1940 to 45, 5 million, as late as 1940-45. In 17th century, 17 million Red Indians. In same 17th-18th century, 37 million population tha Mexicans ka. Today Mexicans are only 1 million. That was the Spaniards were doing it. In USA, the Puritan settlers, Puritans who settled, because Puritans were driven out by Oliver Cromwell from England. Cromwell के बाद जो किंग चार्ल्स आया, तो क्रॉमवेल तो प्यूरिटन था ना, तो जो उसके बाद प्यूरिटन माइग्रेशन हुआ, उन्होंने 17 मिलियन रेड इंडियंस एंड बिलियंस ऑफ बाइसन्स. Bisons roamed the American plateaus in billions. Today you only see their heads, in the drawing rooms. They are finished. Now, as a civilization which is guilty of such violence, genocide, they are guilty. They are now transferring that guilt, trying to get rid of their guilt by shifting it to, of all the people, Hindus. Why Hindus? The question is, why Hindus? Why are they doing it to Hindus? Genocide भी यहाँ, racialism भी यहाँ. Racism, I mean, they killed all the non-white. They think non-white are, backward in evolution, and among the white also the Germans were at the top. Germans were the purest of all. And उस वक्त जब आपस में लड़े, तो Germans had the right to rule because they were the purest of the white people. So this shifted to Hindu. Now, this is a very interesting point, that the American Academy, which at one time was devoted to Indian thought in the 19th century, Europe, which in 19th century used Sanskrit to liberate itself from Arabic. By 1810-17, all the Arabic chairs were abolished and they were replaced by Sanskrit chairs. You see? And from Renaissance onwards, Saladin onwards, there was an Islamic colonization of Europe, European mind also. Europe got all their knowledge of Greek thinkers and others through Arabic intervention, Avicenna, etc., scholars. And they actually captured Spain, they captured East Europe, the great Turkish Empire. Fall of Constantinople was the fall of classical Europe. And it was the end of the Byzantine Christianity. You see, it only then one form survived in Russia, the Eastern Orthodox Church, but it put an end to Byzantine Christianity. It's a matter that the Christian nations of Europe under Charlemagne, they fought back. Spain was liberated, but Constantinople was never liberated, and Jerusalem was never liberated. You see, there it remains, there's this fight there. Now, they were so much anti-Islam during Renaissance that Dante's Divine Comedy, उसमें मोहम्मद साहब जो है वो हेल में है. He puts Muhammad Sahib in hell, you see. And this was the structure. And when they discovered Sanskrit, Europeans, they discovered Sanskrit thanks to Dara Shikoh. Dara Shikoh translated 66 Upanishads into Persian in Srinagar, कश्मीर में वो एक जो ईस्ट में एक पहाड़ है उसे कहते हैं वो परी महल. At night because the yogis, darvesh used to be there, Sufis, and there used to be music, Sufiyon music hota hai, music and this, and he went to a great scholar and he translated 66. It was carried by some Frenchman first to Europe, then German to Europe, and Duperron, one Frenchman, Duperron, he translated from Persian into Latin. And then from Latin, it was translated, Sanskrit Upanishads were translated into most European languages. And then the curiosity began. And then, Kalidas and Shakuntala and Goethe, goes gaga over Shakuntala. The Sanskrit poetry and Sanskrit thought. This is how. Then Srinivas, M.N. Srinivas said in India, Sanskritization, which was wrong. In India, it was Anglicization. But in Europe, actually, it was Sanskritization in 19th century. Their Sanskritization. And they produced it a very productive contact because they never, never moved away from their own ground, from their own heritage. Plato, Aristotle को नहीं छोड़ा उन्होंने, वो उसके साथ they studied the Indian thought, and the result is they produced a new discipline, historical linguistics. They produced a new thought system, structuralism, and they produced great minds, Saussure and Roman Jakobson and Trubetskoy, Schiller, Schelling, Nietzsche, Schopenhauer, they were all either Sanskritists or scholars of Sanskrit. So there was Sanskritization of Europe. So Sanskrit became a liberator for the Western mind from the Arabic, onslaught. And Edward Said, in his book Orientalism, if you see that book, it is all about why now the European and the American universities, they are so dismissive of Arabic scholarship. He has actually put on record the fact that for some reason suddenly the European mind moved away from Arabic and moved towards Sanskrit thought. Earlier they believed Arabic is the mother language. They now said that no, it is Sanskrit, and in historical linguistics, as you know, how in the reconstruction and all that. So this liberation, what was a liberation? A community which gave them liberation from one kind of imprisonment of the mind. You see, in 19th century they started translating their books into their European languages. Suddenly they become anti-why. When does it happen? If we try to fix the date, I think it is around 1990, late 1980s. In 1986, we had an education policy. For the first time, there were earlier also there was Kothari Commission and there were other education policies. But in 1986, for the first time, it was called National Education Policy. National. And for the first time, there was, remember Kothari, बहुत नाम है Kothari साहब, Kothari Commission Education का. Kothari Commission clearly says English should be the medium of instruction from class 1. You see? और बहुत रिस्पेक्ट है कोठारी कमीशन के एजुकेशन का. बट इट इज़ इन द 1986 एजुकेशन पॉलिसी दैट इट इज़, इतनी हिम्मत नहीं थी कि काट दें. दे टॉक अबाउट पुटिंग संस्कृत into the syllabi or bringing in Indian languages, although by and large the structure remained the same. So in 1990 they set up a review committee for 1986. It was headed by Acharya Ram, some Ramanathan or Ramchandra Acharya. So this review committee was set up to suggest modifications. And now this was the BJP government. At that time, in 1990, the Ram movement started. Ram Mandir movement. Now Ram Mandir movement started at the same time. Started from Somnath, Advani ji, and all over. And then in 1992, in Ayodhya, the bringing down of this, and then Rajiv Gandhi's action. The whole movement and the government and the attempt to change the education. If we try to fix a date, how did the American Academy change the gear or the track, and why? First of all, the Academy is a forearm of the government policies. You see, they were balancing between Israel and Palestine. You see, and there was the rising, the money, the oil money. Oil money was a big attraction. Oil money, and the oil money was all with the Arabs, Saudi Arabia and others. So the economic and the political and the long-term gains. Now they had rejected the in academia. They had rejected the Arabic scholarship. So they were feeling that there's something. Now the oil money is there. We want oil money. So they had to reverse the gear, change the gear. And what better than to pick on the Hindu society. And in any case, they had a precedent, a tradition of Western theories being applied to Hindu community to rubbish their culture and practices. The liberalism of 19th century. But there is the precedent that socio-political liberalism was used in 19th century to rubbish the Hindu society. So there is a precedent for the West opposing itself more to Hindu society than to Islamic. They opposed Islamic because there was Islamic colonization of Europe, physical as well as mental. And no doubt the Sanskrit thought and Hindu thought, it helped them liberate themselves. But with the change in economics and the consequent political aligning, you see, couldn't afford that Soviet Union should be the only friend that the Arabs have. So they had to shift. And the academy is funded by the vested interests, West के vested interests. Now this vested, of course, is now the W or the V, but vested interests. They are the evangelical and the Islamic. They fund the universities, they fund the agenda, and at stake, ultimately, these two sources of funding, ultimately they have to have a conflict among themselves finally. If the common enemy is destroyed, the Jews, the Hindus, they are the common enemies, because the Abrahamic system is the antithesis of the Vedic system. They have three: Judaism, Islamic, and we have four: Sanatan, Jain, Bauddha, and Sikh. There is a natural antipathy, a natural Abrahamic antipathy to the Hindu system.
Why did this antipathy not exist when they were being liberalized from Arabs, for example, with Sanskritization.
Yes.
तब वो नहीं थी.
तब नहीं थी.
So this sudden shift you're saying from
हाँ,
18th to 19th
हाँ,
century.
yes. No, I am saying it. This shift begins to shape itself after 60s, 70s, 80s, and it becomes very concrete in the 90s. 90s, when first of all the political and the economic necessity of aligning with the Arabs, huh,
That was gone.
that is earlier. It shapes itself earlier. Now that source becomes a very rich source of funding to the American government for all its projects. They promoted wars also there for their own industry and for everything. So in that larger scheme, one element which will be pro-Arab for them, bring sympathy and money, is this. And mostly and it was easy. The shift was easy. It is now, you can say, it is also an attempt of the second liberation from Sanskrit, from Indian thought. There is just as there was too much overwhelmed. Every university in Europe had chairs in Sanskrit and powerful institutes of Indology. Gradually today you find most of them bound up, and जो हैं, barring one or two exceptions like the Institute of Indology in Vienna, like Heidelberg was a big center, but now they have shifted to modern languages. So Urdu is being studied, Hindi is being studied, because the ethnocentricity, the conflict, promotion of conflict. You see, a time when American Academy was very much pro, and then it shifted. Then the very history, begin from 1096 to 1291, 200 years of crusades. And the 1459, I think, when Constantinople was lost and the Turkish dominance of Europe, and the Renaissance, then the conflict and subduing. In that big flywheel of history, Europe and Islam, I think India got caught up. Because our government was not watchful. We could have saved ourselves. Even if today who is making it possible for the American Academy to create the kind of things that Raji Malhotra ji is so worried about? Who is making it possible? Indians, bright Indians, dollar washed and theory colored. See, they are taken there, they are used, they are the ones who transfer from Sanskrit to this, and they are in the forefront. Now what could we do? What we should have done? In 1960 or so, when we began to feel the pinch of living on donated wheat, we took steps to increase our own production. But we somehow forgot that the subordination in education, the subservience in education is far more dangerous, and we should have taken steps to free ourselves and to be self-reliant, आत्मनिर्भर अपनी एजुकेशन में, अपनी चीज़ें पढ़ा. That we didn't do. वो पंडित जी निशंक जी इतना बड़ा टीका लगा के विश्वगुरु. मैंने विश्वगुरु इज़ ए कंपाउंड. इट हैज़ टू मीनिंग्स. जिसका विश्व गुरु है, ये भी उसका अर्थ है, और दूसरा अर्थ है जो विश्व का गुरु है. तो हम पहले विश्व के गुरु थे, अब पूरा विश्व हमारा गुरु है. ये सिचुएशन है हमारी. This is what is happening. So the point is, what should we did not do. Food is more necessary, because in any case we have great admiration and we are aping a civilization which is a civilization of the stomach. You know, there are, as I think I did say in one place, that there are Greeks were a civilization of the mind, huh? And the Chinese is a civilization of achar, conduct. Indian civilization ancient was a civilization of adhyatma, spirituality, you know, adhyatma. And the contemporary civilization is a civilization of the stomach. Sari discussion, sare law, sara legislation, everything is about food. Food.
Pleasure.
हाँ, pleasure and utilitarian. वही happiness को they say that I read somewhere that the utilitarians believed in promoting human happiness. Why we could have easily, I mean, just as we stopped imports, we should have stopped the import of theory. You know, Japan, when Europe was expanding all over the world, colonizing, Japan in 18th century forbade the entry of any foreigner. For full 150 years or so, no foreigner entered Japan. And when Japan came out of that splendid isolation, it came out so powerful. We could have paid attention to our education, which we didn't. It is when people started talking national education policy, review of education policy, and this and that. Then they started equated nationalism with fascism, and this became, I mean, they did it, they constructed it. They constructed it because the gear had shifted, the direction had shifted, government direction had shifted. And the American professors are as much sarkari intellectuals, sarkari buddhijeevi, as Indian professors. They are sarkari paid intellectuals है ना सारे. And उनको ये काम दिया गया, अब ये करना आपने, बड़े मज़े से हो रहा है. And the handiwork of our people. You see, this unfortunate thing is our young, bright young people. You see, जो यूरोप पर पूरी हिस्ट्री है उनकी क्रिश्चियन सिविलाइजेशन और इस्लामिक सिविलाइजेशन का, वो बैकग्राउंड में है. और एडवर्ड सईद की ओरिएंटलिज्म किताब बहुत फेमस हो गई थी, वेरी फेमस, एंड इट वाज रेड ऑल ओवर. एंड इन 1990s, एजाज अहमद, an Indian, what he did, if you look at Orientalism, look at the index, there are only 3 references to India. Those are also marginal references. But, and the Ijaz Ahmad's Orientalism is about Western dismissal of Arabic scholarship. Ijaz Ahmad shifted it to Sanskrit scholarship. That Edward Said talking Orientalism, about him Orientalism meant this. And in that book he wrote, talked about BJP, he talked about everything, all these things. And he was invited to JNU also as a visiting professor, naturally. So there is, you can see, you know, what I have done is today, I have speculated on a large scale. And there is one large, and then in between there is a local for and against, as in natural antipathy and natural sympathy. Natural sympathy. After all, in terms of intellectual system, Christianity is closer to Islam than to Hinduism. One God, one book, one truth, one priestly class, heresy, वो system, this is a organized system. Pagans are not, we are pagans.
No, in the Christianity. वो भी तो concept है ना, both are common, pagans and Catholics.
For both of them. Yes. बाकी जो नहीं बिलीव करते वो पेगन है, यही कह रहे हो ना आप?
Heathens, pagans.
हाँ, heathens, pagans. Or they need to be, according to one, they need to be, you know, relieved of their, both relieved of their sin and darkness. Sin and darkness. उससे रिलीव करना है. You see, in the history of mankind, in the 11th century, when the great powerful Arab armies, they came here, they went to Spain, right across Asia or Europe. They shifted. This is important. In one line, what this did, it destroyed the classical age, both East and West. Secondly, the pen was replaced by sword. The pen was replaced by sword.